Tangent and cotangent. So here is tangent. So we still have the unit circle. Everything is always based off the unit circle. So when you're looking at the unit circle, we know that we go from 0 to 360 and we have ordered pairs on the quadrantal angles, which is the 0, 90, 180, and the cosine of x and the sine of x correspond to the ordered pairs, the x value and the y value. And then we transferred that onto this graph. And so here is the unit circle open where it's 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. Notice how from 0 to 90 is quadrant 1, and 90 to 180 is quadrant 2, 180 to 270 is quadrant 3, and 270 to 360 is quadrant 4. And this one here is going backwards. So we know that if we have this one here is going counterclockwise, the positive direction, and this one is clockwise, which is going in the negative direction. So we are going to graph tangent. So this is the graph of tangent. We know that tangent is sine of theta over cosine of theta. So when we know that we need to figure out where cosine of theta is 0. Because one thing that you always have to remember is that whenever you have 0 in the denominator, no matter what you have up here in the numerator, the denominator is 0. That means you're always going to have a vertical asymptote. It's undefined. It's an extraneous solution. You cannot have 0 in the denominator. It becomes a vertical asymptote. So for tangent, since I know sine of theta is um, that tangent is sine of theta over cosine of theta. Cosine of theta is 0, and we could look at the unit circle, or you could use your left-hand rule that 0 is cosine is 1, so it's not 0, but at cosine of 90, we have 0 there. Therefore, the tangent has an asymptote at 90. So we know that we're going to have an asymptote going up and down 90. Now, if I know 90, then I also know 270 because, and we could do 0 and 90 degrees on our left hand, but 90 and 270 are always corresponding. The only difference is that this one here is going to be a -1, while this one here is a +1. That's the only thing you need to remember. But if 90 is 0, then 270 is also 0. So we know that there is another asymptote at 270. And then these two are going to be at that's the only thing that we need to worry about. But going backwards on there, this here is -90. So I know that this one right here is -90 degrees, which is the same as that. So that's going to give us an asymptote as well. And then this one here is, if I keep going in this direction, this is going to be -270. And so -270 is also going to be an asymptote. So that's what it's going to look like there. Now the graph itself is going to help us here. I know the tangent of 0. So the tangent of 0 you could do on your left hand. So the tangent of 0 is going to be 0 over the square root of 4, which is just going to be 0 using our left hand. So I know that this here is going to be 0, but at 90, it's going to be an asymptote. It's going to be undefined because we already know that because cosine is going to be 0 in the denominator. So I need something in between the 0 and the 90 degrees, and that is where tangent of 45 is. So the tangent of 45, you could do the left-hand rule. You could do square root of 2 over 2 because that's what sine of 45 is. And then cosine is also square root of 2 over 2, whichever way that you want to do it. Square root of 2 over 2 over square root of 2 over 2 is still going to be 1. Or if you do it using the left-hand rule, square root of 2 over the square root of 2, that is also going to be 1. So we know that the tangent of 45 is going to be 1. So here in between there is 45. So this one here is the 45, and we're going to have 1. And then I need to go from 0 to -90. So from 0 to -90, that one there is going to be -45. So when I do -45, what is that going to give me? And the -45, because sine is then going to be negative on in that quadrant and positive there, that means that this one here is going to be negative as well. So doing all students take CAT or calculus, either one, this quadrant 4, cosine is positive, sine is negative. So we have a negative divided by a positive, it gives us a negative, which makes sense because then here is, I'm sorry, that's the wrong place. It's going to be right here below there, it's going to be -1. And then the graph is going to approach the asymptote and it's going to look like that. So we put arrows on it. It does look like a cubic function. And one thing that we know is that it keeps repeating because this is a unit circle. It's going to keep repeating around and around or going the other way around and around. So that means that this one here, if it's 0, it's 0 at 0 degrees, it's 0. It's also at 180. So if it's here at 0, 180 works the same way, except for this part is negative if we're talking about cosine, but this is the 0 that we're talking about. So here we're going to have that at 0, and then here it's going to be 1, and then this one here is going to be -1, and it just keeps repeating 0, -1, and then 1, and it'll just keep going on and on. So it's 0 at -180, and so we do here, here, and then we look at that, and then we do the same thing on this side. And it just keeps going on and on and on and on all the way through. So that's the tangent, and the cotangent is very similar to this. It doesn't change on there. They're cofunctions and reciprocals, so they're going to look very similar on there, and we do the exact same thing. The only difference here is that cotangent of theta is going to be cosine over sine. And so that's now we're going to look at when sine is going to be 0. And so sine is going to be 0 at 0. So we know that there's going to be an asymptote here. And then we also know that it's going to be 0 at 180, over here at 180. So we're going to do an asymptote at 180. And then if it's at 0 and 180, I know it has to be at 360 because 0 and 360 are the same. And then also if I go the other way around, -180 is the same as 180. And then -360, we know we're going to have asymptotes going up and down there. And then when is the cotangent going to be 0? Well, that's going to be 0 when cosine is 0. We know that cosine is 0 in the numerator because anything, if I have 0 in the numerator divided by whatever, it's also going to be 0. And so I know that that there is going to be 0 at 90. It's also going to be 0 at 270. Therefore, -90 and -270 follow. And then we are also doing the cotangent of 45 because they're just reciprocals. So if tangent of 45 is 1, then the cotangent of 45 is also 1. So the cotangent of 45 is going to be 1 right there. And therefore, in between here, you're going to have the same value. So here it's 45 is 1. This one here, cotangent, is going to be -1 because these are 45-degree reference angles. And so they're going to mean the same thing, but cotangent in the second quadrant is negative. All students take calculus CAT. That one there is going to be negative there. So therefore, in 90 to 180, this is the second quadrant, we're going to have a -1 there. And so then the curves are going to look like that. And so same thing here, it's going to be repeating and it's going to repeat here as well and it's going to look like that. And then it repeats the same way over here and then over here it's going to repeat the same way. And it looks like this and it repeats here and it repeats here and it looks like that. So that is cotangent and tangent down there in the graphs of that. Make sure that you practice these.